Our clothes, as a mirror, reflect the history of civilization. It is more than second layer, as nowadays fashion and style became the way of self-expression, seeing deep symbolism in surrounding material things. Speaking via things and rituals is absolutely in Kazakh style. That is why the history of national costume is an incredible world exposing our mentality.
Today in program, high status cap, inspiration of zergers, jewelers, ecological aesthetics. When choosing a print, an accessory or a piece of clothing in a national style, many do not even realize that they form what is now called a trend. The ethnic style is a trend not only of fashion runways, but also street styles, street fashion, as well as an up-to-date trend in design in general. In today's program, we will try to figure out how neighborhood with other nations influence our clothing. What is ethnic code and why the Oriental style is so popular in the West? 2014 Paris Fashion Week, Russian designer Uliana Sergeyenko shows the spring-summer collection, which is inspired by Kazakhstan, her homeland, and cultural traditions of Central Asia. Miniature skull caps, robe styling, strips referring to ikat and adras fabrics, spectacular embroidery, carpet-making techniques, and bright colors. The bet on traditional Oriental luxury and color is always winning, especially considering that everything that is inherent in the notion of haute couture was always appreciated in the costume traditions of Central Asia. Unique manufacturing techniques, individual tailoring, high quality, best materials, and expensive jewelry. What we see on the models, of course, does not have much resemblance with the national clothes of Kazakhs or Uzbeks, but the whole collection undoubtedly refers to Oriental folklore. In addition to skull caps, models wear rings in the form of a turban. How did this headpiece penetrate the West? We tried to find an answer to this question and at the same to find out why the saying "Sshit kolpak, da ne po-kolpakovski" Russian tongue twister is relevant for two ethnic groups. In all these portraits created by different European artists in different epochs, the common thing is one particular headpiece. It has the Persian name turban, and sometimes it is also called chalma. Is turban a military trophy or a secret weapon that conquered the world? Most likely, it penetrated to the West after the Crusades of Christians to the East, from the end of the 15th to the 18th century. Then by the beginning of the 19th century, the headpiece had the second wave of popularity due to the Egyptian campaign of Napoleon. This is the very case in the history of fashion when wars and political conflicts affected the fact that people began not only to dress a little differently, but as experts would say, introduce a foreign ethnic element into their suit, although for a Muslim turban is a shroud, which is constantly with him, and for a European it is just a decorative accessory. Simple people wrap their heads with a white linen instead of wearing a hat. The same is the headpiece of a clergyman, Chinese traveler of the 13th century Chan Chun. The first travelers who came to the territory of present-day Central Asia and Kazakhstan knew very little about the culture of local peoples, and even more about the regional costume traditions. For example, during the times of the Russian Empire, there were no significant differences between Kazakhs and Kyrgyz. Moreover, Kazakh clothes are similar to Kyrgyz, especially white caps that they call ak kolpak. Kyrgyz caps are cut from a single piece of cloth and have small brims that are slightly cut. Kazakhs also have a similar cap. However, Kazakhs also have a headdress called ayir kolpak or murak, which only sultans wore. It is very high. Its crown is sewn separately, sometimes from 4 wedges, and then brims are sewn to the crown. Brims are very wide and cut to the end. It looks very solemn, gorgeous, and I would say that it immediately shows that a person wearing it has a high social position, because such caps were worn only by sultans. These unique images of representatives of the nomadic nobility were made in the late 19th century by the Swiss Henry Moser. He more than once traveled to the Kazakh steppes and on his return brought to Europe a lot of national clothes, weapons, carpets, and craftsmen's products. When he was staying here in Kazakhstan, he was gifted new beautiful, interesting things because according to Kazakh traditions, a guest who came from afar should never leave empty-handed. Also, according to traditions, it was obligatory to give the guest anything he paid attention to in the house. Thus, of course, H. Moser gathered a very large collection. When Henry Moser was in the western and northern Kazakhstan, he photographed sultans who posed for him. They always wore this murak, a yer kolpak, on top of the skull cap, which is the inner headdress, and it was like a finishing touch. Then there are two more photos when the men did not wear this ayer kolpak, but on one photo the man holds it in his hand, and in the other it is on the nightstand. It was not obligatory to wear ayer kolpak when taking a photo, but it was mandatory to have it in the frame, as it proved the person's sultan status. The futures of the two caps develop in different ways. Kazakh ayer kolpak nowadays is a traditional present for a jubilee and a souvenir for foreign guests, while in Kyrgyzstan, deputies suggest to equate this headpiece with state symbols and at the same time oblige the president, premier, and speaker of the parliament to wear the cap at official events. As for the traveler Henry Moser, on his return to Europe, he did what would today be classified as country PR. He published on the press the notes on the trip to hospital nomads and sedentary peoples of Central Asia, wrote a book of memories, was photographed and gifted national clothes, and at the end of his life bequeathed his Eastern collection to the Historical Museum of Bern. Human thinking is designed in such a way that we cannot remain indifferent when we see something outstanding, beautiful, and unique. For example, works of ancient masters, Scythian works in the animal style of decorations of Western Kazakhstani zurgers, jewelers, in a geometric style continue to delight people and deliver aesthetic pleasure. In the art of different people, there are many examples of their own bright artistic and constructive insights. Historian Shahzada Toktabayeva calls such ethnic insights ethnic code. If in earlier times I paid more attention to cultural interrelations, now I decided to pay more attention to ethnic codes. That is, to those things and objects in Kazakh art, to those works that do not have such vivid analogies with the art of other nations. Ancient moments, some ancient insights, archaic elements of decor and design are traced in them. And as there are no direct analogies with the art of other ethnic groups, all above mentioned is included in the ethnic code. As for the Western Kazakhstan jewelry art in the geometric style, then it is really a phenomenon. An ethnic code is expressively traced in it. In particular, geometric patterns, all kinds of triangles made in embossing techniques have motifs of the grains in it, in the form of squares, triangles, rhombuses, and so on. Mother-in-laws kudagi gifted each other kudagi juzik. The rings symbolized well-being and unity of families. Such rings had a magic of bringing together the two families, clans. At the same time, there were very large rings that covered the entire hand. They could be worn by a man. They are massive and in fact, they are chronotopes. If we carefully consider and decipher, we can notice that they reflect an artistic symbolic display of the casual temporal relationship. For example, masters of antiquity of the 18th and 19th centuries drew their inspiration mostly from space. From the starry world, because there, in the steppes in the west, is little vegetation, so they were most inspired by space. We can say that in this kind of ring, the macrocosm is displayed in the microcosm. Note, that is the idea of something big and something small, which is very interesting and entertaining. Steppe people can hardly be considered great masters in the production of a variety of clothes, as nomadic way of life did not encourage it. Nevertheless, thanks to the Great Silk Road, they have much earlier than the Europeans had access to the best technologies, materials, clothing, and jewelry created by other people. Of course, not every steppe man, but only the representatives of the nomadic nobility always had something imported in their suit. As for Asian exports, such things that came in the caravan routes to the West as Chinese silk and porcelain, which created a whole trend in Europe design. Japanese kimonos, umbrellas, and fans won the hearts of foreign fashionable people. People, by their nature, rarely can resist something exotic. That is why the exports explain the constant popularity of Oriental motifs. For example, in Europe, men mostly wore skirts, but the great migration of nations influenced European men, and they began to wear trousers, stockings, trousers. They were influenced by the Huns, the 5th century, who were all the time on horseback, and naturally they wore pants. How clothing with petroglyphs appeared in the Japanese museum Kobe? And why did the medieval European clogs suddenly become Kazakh-looking? Coming up next on Oriental Village. How clothing with petroglyphs appeared in the Japanese museum Kobe, and why did the medieval European clog suddenly become Kazakh? Coming up next on Oriental Vintage. Any jewelry shop can envy the treasury of the Kazan Kremlin. Many of the jewelry were created by Tatar and Bashkir jewelers. In the 18th and 19th centuries, shops and associations of artisans flourished in Kazan. For example, the village Rybnaya Sloboda was famous. Jewelry from the village is a good example of how the national creativity of neighbors influenced the Kazakh jewelers. When I was on an expedition in northern Kazakhstan in the 70s of the 20th century, I got acquainted with jewelers and craftsmen, and they showed me their insights, different details they created. And there, I also saw jewelry made in technology, called by a well-known researcher of the history of jewelry art, Chivir, as stamp a stone insert. At the same time, an important detail should be noted that if Kazan Tatars and Bashkirs jewelry is overloaded with detail, there are their ethnic codes characteristic only of Kazan Tatars. Then Kazakhs naturally withdrew things characteristics for Kazan Tatars culture and took the most democratic samples. These samples gently fit in the Kazakh environment, and masters began to produce Kazakh jewelry in the same style, in the same version.
И, в общем-то, стали производить казахские украшения тоже в таком же стиле.
This outfit in the mid-90s impressed couturier Pierre Cardin, Oliver Lapidus, Hanne Moret, and at the time the First Lady of France, Bernadette Chirac. Costume designers Kazakhstan citizen Zhanara Mirzazhanova, who presented her works for the contest Design 21, dedicated to the half-century anniversary of UN. 50 designers selected by a jury among hundreds of candidates from around the world participated in the shows in Paris, New York, Geneva, and Tokyo. With a costume, they had to depict the aesthetics, the peculiarities of the national mentality, tastes, and traditions.
Я решила подойти так основательно, то есть показать, что наш костюм состоит не только, допустим...
I decided to be thorough and show that our costume consists not only of outerwear and that modern Kazakhs can also wear inner clothing. Here is a stylization. I said, a waistcoat or chapan. This is a slanting claps.
Вот эта вот косая застежка, вот такая вот. Ну, она не явно выраженная, но...
It is not in an obvious way expressed as a symbol of yin-yang, such a small reference to the East, namely to the Chinese East.
Большой отсыл к Востоку, именно китайскому. Правда, когда я представила этот костюм уже на утверждение, мне в Министерстве культуры немножко такое замечание сделали. Он у вас не казахский, а такой монгольский.
Although, when I presented this suit for approval, I was told by the Ministry of Culture, it's not Kazakh, but rather Mongolian or Chinese. To which I said, there was the Great Silk Road, and all were subjects to the influence of the East. And it is not a secret for anybody the Kazakh costumes even vary by region. South, Western, North, and East. They accepted my explanation and did not argue.
Такое объяснение, и не стали спорить. И самый, конечно, здесь трудоемкий процесс был над созданием рисунка.
The most laborious was the process of creating a drawing. I talked about rock paintings, which is very clearly visible on the back. You can see that I have stylized the sun-headed god who is riding the bull.
Которая едет на таком быке. И
And I explained that the Kurap Korpe was made by cutting and making a mosaic out of rectangular or triangular pieces of cloth.
треугольные кусочки, и они составлялись как мозаика. Здесь я вот решила технику тоже использовать, когда
And here I decided to use this technique. When pieces are joined together. But at the same time, there is a drawing. It does not repeat on all the coats, and this drawing is very different. However, everything is connected by one line. It symbolizes infinity, yin-yang, the Silk Road, the connection of generations. There is a lot of symbolism.
Путь бесконечный, шелковый путь, то есть связь поколений. То есть у меня как бы много символизм здесь какой-то вот у меня проявлялся.
Foreigners like the chiffon blouse turning into a headdress. It is noteworthy that at the time, when there was no fashion for the so-called hoodie, such a technique as imitation of a hood was already used in the costume of the Kazakhstani designer. Strangely enough, it was inspired by our native Kazakh kimishek. The shoes with bells in the sole were based on sabot. The contestants presented two suits. Particularly eye-catching, the Kazakhstani outfit looked on one of the top models.
Очень известная модель Adriana Sklernikova.
Adriana Sklernikova, very famous model at the time. If you are fond of and remember models of the 90s, you should know that she is the longest-legged model.
Длинноногая модель. Она впоследствии вышла замуж за
Later, she married French football player Karambe and became Adrian Karambe.
Адриана Карамбе. То есть самая длинноногая.
If on our models the outfit hit the ankle as it was intended to on Adriana Sklernikova, the pants were shorter and looked like breeches because of her long legs.
У нее они такие как бриджики получились.
Under the terms of the competition, the entire outfit, jewelry, and accessories had to be made from domestic environmentally friendly materials. It is hard to believe, but with the extremely difficult economic situation in the country at that time, Gennaro still managed to present the products made in Kazakhstan.
Я даже помню, конкурсант из Бразилии сделал полностью платье.
I even remember the contestants from Brazil who made the dress entirely from coffee beans. That's why I used our Kargalin wool.
Каргалинскую на тот момент. Затем я использовала такую.
Then I used Takmak yarn, Kyrgyz chiffon, and cooperated with local jewelers. Thus, silver, brass, gold were also taken from local masters.
Серебро, латунь, все было тоже золото местное.
Gennaro Mirzajanova was among top 10 designers. One of her outfits was purchased by the famous Kobe Art Museum. Since then in Japan, they have been admiring the stylized petroglyphs of early nomads. And this is already worn by domestic women of fashion. Outfits with stylized tulips are the most popular among the latest models. Now everyone knows that tulips' homeland is not Holland, but our steppes.
Мы хотим показать вообще моду современных номадов.
We want to show the fashion of modern nomads. Thus, we stylized the first collection, where we took cut as a basis and connected it with the Great Silk Road. Took Indian silk and stylized it in layers.
Взяли вот тоже вот где-то связали с нашим шелковым путем. Там брали индийские шелка.
Nomad should not have to show off his clothes, should be convenient, transforming, and at the same time it was colorful. That is why we have a gold collection, and it is a dedication to the Golden Man and the Silk Road. And at the same time we use cut.
Не лишена такого колорита. Поэтому мы вот сделали, у нас такая золотая коллекция, то есть где-то посвящение.
The skirt was our best seller. However, this collection has already been put into production. We replicated it. The first collection had a good resonance, especially the skirt, which looks like бельдемше.
Уже прям запустилось производство. Мы ее тиражировали, и первая коллекция очень имела такой хороший резонанс. Особенно юбка, которая вот по типу бельдемше. То есть она...
It was without a zip, it was flung open and was two-sided.
Запахивалась и была двухсторонняя.
You also probably know that nomads never threw away their clothes but changed them by sewing in a piece of cloth.
Выкидывали, а как-то вот их могли тюнинговать.
Therefore, when we stylized the first collection, we made clothes from several shreds. For example, one jacket could be made of different cloth.
В первой коллекции мы как будто бы ее из нескольких лоскутков сделали. Даже в пиджаке рукав мог быть.
Stripe print silk sleeves, floral print cuff, and brocade lapel.
Допустим, полосатый принт. Тут же манжета была с цветочным принтом, лацкан, парча.
The modern world is open. We can observe the development of fashion in other countries. Moreover, we can wear trendy pieces from around the world. But the intuitive knowledge and understanding of our ethnic codes make us invariably return to our national costume and seek its interpretation in various collections.